Rick Grimes didn't become the most iconic survivor in television history overnight. It took 9 brutal, life-altering moments to transform a small-town Georgia deputy into a man who'd bite out throats and blow up bridges. Each event stripped something away and forged something new. So let's break down every single turning point that changed Rick Grimes forever, starting with the moment he opened his eyes and the world he knew was already gone. Waking up alone, Rick Grimes goes to sleep as a small-town sheriff's deputy and wakes up in a horror movie. No transition, no gradual descent, just a coma that lasts around 4 to 5 weeks. And when his eyes finally open, civilization has already ended without him. He stumbles past barricaded hospital doors spray-painted with "Don't Open" dead inside, past body bags, past abandoned military vehicles, and into a neighborhood so empty it doesn't even echo. Every other survivor lived through the slow collapse. They watched the news reports, saw the military checkpoints fail, buried people they loved while the lights were still on. Rick skipped all of it. He went from normal Tuesday to full apocalypse like someone changing a channel. Here's the thing. That gap is both his greatest weakness and his greatest strength. He's dangerously naive. He still thinks like a cop, still believes in procedure and the basic goodness of people. Everyone else has already abandoned those instincts because the world beat it out of them. But Rick's naivety means he still has something almost nobody else does. Genuine belief that people are worth saving. That becomes the foundation his entire leadership is built on. Now, the fact that he survived weeks in a coma without care is suspicious, and a webisode called The Oath actually shows a hospital staffer keeping one comatose patient alive before abandoning the building, so there's circumstantial evidence someone kept Rick breathing on purpose. And this moment lodged so deep in the audience's brain that a fan theory emerged, claiming the entire series was Rick's dying dream. It gained enough traction that Robert Kirkman himself had to publicly confirm Rick is not still in a coma, which is, not ideal when your creator has to announce your show is real. But Rick's coma didn't just change him, it created him. Every decision he makes for the rest of the series traces back to waking up alone, and the first truly devastating consequence is waiting just a few miles down the road wearing his best friend's face, killing his best friend. Up until this moment, Rick has killed walkers. He's defended himself. He's made hard calls. But he has never looked a living person he loved in the eyes and chosen to end their life. That changes on a moonlit field near Herschel's farm. Shane lures Rick out there with a lie about moving a prisoner. The plan is simple. Kill Rick, walk back to camp, sell it as self-defense. Take Lori, take Carl, take everything. Shane has a gun drawn and a narrative ready to go. But Rick figures it out. He doesn't shoot Shane. He closes the distance and stabs him in the heart. Up close, intimate, the kind of killing you feel in your hands. He whispers, "You made me do this," which is a fascinating thing to say while you're actively driving a knife into your best friend's chest. Nobody made Rick do anything. He assessed the threat and executed, but he can't admit that to himself yet. This is the birth of a pattern that defines Rick for the rest of the series. Doing terrible things and telling himself the world forced his hand. Shane drops. Then Shane gets back up. Turns out everyone is already infected. You don't need a bite, you just need to die. Shane reanimates right there, and it's Carl who pulls the trigger on his father's best friend's walking corpse. A child shooting a reanimated man in the head to save his dad. Cool, add that to the list. But here's the thing nobody talks about enough. Shane's philosophy doesn't die with Shane. Kill threats before they become problems. Protect your circle and forget everyone else. Rick rejects all of that in the moment, then spends 6 seasons quietly adopting almost every single one of Shane's positions. The governor attacks, Shane's voice echoes. Terminus happens, Shane's logic makes more sense. By the time Rick is hacking people apart in a church, he's running Shane's playbook. And if you think killing his best friend broke something in Rick, wait until you hear what losing his wife did to his mind. Lori's sacrifice. Killing Shane was Rick's first step into a darker version of himself, but he was still functioning, still leading. Lori's death is the moment all of that collapses. Lori goes into labor while walkers are overrunning the prison. The only people with her are Maggie and Carl. No doctor, no supplies, just a concrete room and a knife. Lori realizes a natural delivery isn't going to work, so she tells Maggie to perform an emergency cesarean right there on the floor, fully knowing it will kill her. Maggie does it, delivers Judith. Lori bleeds out, but that's not the worst part. Carl stays behind to put a bullet in his mother's body so she doesn't reanimate. He's maybe 13 years old. Rick arrives to find Maggie carrying a newborn and a blood-soaked floor where his wife used to be, and he just falls apart, not quietly. The man starts hearing phone calls from a disconnected phone in the prison, having full conversations with dead people. Amy, Jackie, Jim. Eventually, Lori herself. Notably not Shane, despite what a lot of fans misremember. Shane isn't on that phone. Those hallucinations matter because they expose something critical. The hardened leader who just stabbed his best friend and declared this isn't a democracy anymore is actually incredibly fragile underneath all of it. The phone calls aren't grief, they're psychosis. Rick is genuinely losing his mind. And then there's the paradox. Judith's birth and Lori's death happen simultaneously. Every time Rick looks at that baby, he sees what it cost. Now, Lori was divisive. A lot of fans couldn't stand her. So when she died, the reaction was genuinely complicated. People who hated Lori for 3 seasons suddenly had to sit with the fact that her death gutted them, not because they missed her, but because of what it did to Rick and Carl. But if you think watching Rick talk to dead people on a phone is disturbing, wait until you see what he does with his teeth. Biting out a throat. There's a moment in this show where Rick Grimes stops being a person and starts being something else entirely. And the worst part is, you cheer for it. Here's the setup. Rick, Carl, Daryl, and Michonne are ambushed by Joe and his group of claimers. Joe holds Rick at gunpoint. One of his men pins Carl to the ground and starts trying to assault him. It's the worst possible scenario, and Joe is savoring every second of it, promising to kill Rick slow. So Rick headbutts Joe in the face. And then, instead of reaching for a weapon, instead of doing anything a human being would do, Rick lunges forward and bites out Joe's throat with his teeth, just rips it out, like a walker. In the chaos that follows, Rick grabs a knife and stabs the man who touched Carl. Michonne and Daryl handle the rest. Every single claimer dies on that road. But here's where it gets complicated. The audience is supposed to feel relieved. The claimers are irredeemable. Carl was seconds away from something no child should ever experience. Rick did what he had to do. The method, though. That's the part that should bother you. Up to this point, walkers bite humans, and humans use tools. That's the dividing line. That's how you know who's who. Rick reverses that entire dynamic. He adopts the behavioral signature of the monsters to protect his child. In a show literally called The Walking Dead, the main character just demonstrated exactly what that title means. This scene shows up in every badass Rick fan compilation ever made. People love it, but it's simultaneously one of the most disturbing indicators of how far this man has fallen. He didn't just kill Joe, he killed him the way the dead kill the living. And the scariest part, he'd do it again without hesitating. Rick crossed a line here that you don't come back from, but if you think biting a man's throat out on the side of a road is as dark as Rick gets, wait until you hear what he does inside a church. The church massacre. Most people make threats they never intend to keep. Rick Grimes is not most people. After escaping the cannibal slaughterhouse at Terminus, you'd think the nightmare was over. But Gareth and the remaining hunters weren't done. They stalked Rick's group through the woods, captured Bob, and amputated his leg for food. Just casually eating a man's leg around a campfire like it was a cookout, which is, not ideal. But here's where Rick does something that separates him from every other survivor. He doesn't panic, he plans. Gareth assumes the group's strongest fighters have left Father Gabriel's church, so he moves in to pick off whoever's left. Women, children, easy targets. Except Rick anticipated every single step. He returns and traps the hunters inside the church like rats. Gareth tries to negotiate. He's on his knees, bargaining, promising they'll walk away. And Rick just stares at him, like he's listening to someone read the terms and conditions on a software update. And then comes the machete. Back at Terminus, when Rick was on his knees in a cattle trough waiting to have his throat slit, he told Gareth exactly how he was going to die. A machete. Red handle. Said it like he was reading a contract out loud. And in this church, surrounded by stained glass and crucifixes, Rick honored that contract to the letter. He hacked Gareth apart while the man was still trying to talk his way out of it. This isn't reactive violence. Rick made a promise about the specific instrument of a man's death, carried it through weeks of survival and chaos, then fulfilled it like an appointment in his calendar. That's not self-defense. That's a man treating violence as ritual. The church setting makes the whole thing worse. Sanctuary becomes slaughterhouse. He butchered already incapacitated enemies in a house of God and didn't lose a second of sleep over it. The group watched. Some looked horrified. Rick looked like he was finishing a job. But if slaughtering cannibals in a church seems extreme, wait until Rick walks into a community with running water, clean sheets, and zero idea what's coming. Leading Alexandria. For the first time in what feels like forever, Rick Grimes walks into a place with actual houses. Running water, solar panels, kids riding bikes on the street like the world didn't end. Alexandria has walls, infrastructure, and residents who have barely seen a walker up close, let alone bitten a man's throat out on a dark road, and Rick absolutely hates it. Here's the thing, everything about Alexandria screams trapped to the version of Rick who crawled out of Terminus. These people hold dinner parties. They assign jobs like supply runner and discuss community guidelines in living rooms. Meanwhile, Rick is quietly stashing weapons inside the walls because he's convinced these soft, comfortable people are going to get everyone killed. The tension is genuinely fascinating. The man who ripped a cannibal apart with a machete is now supposed to attend council meetings and raise his hand before speaking. He's simultaneously the most dangerous person inside those walls and the person most capable of protecting them. But then Pete Anderson forces the issue. Pete's the town doctor, which makes him valuable. He's also beating his wife, which makes him a monster hiding behind usefulness. Rick confronts him. It turns into a full street brawl, and suddenly, the whole community has to pick a side. When Pete kills Deanna's husband Reg, Deanna gives the order. Rick executes Pete without hesitation. Cool. So he's in charge now. And that's where the real shift happens. Rick goes from pure survival mode to something he hasn't attempted since the farm. He starts thinking about a future, not just how do we not die tomorrow, but how do we build something that lasts. Negotiations with the hilltop and the kingdom. Actual diplomacy from a guy whose previous negotiation strategy was a red-handled machete. The Ricktatorship crystallizes here in its strangest form. His earlier declaration that this isn't a democracy anymore crashes headfirst into Alexandria's democratic processes. Rick knows he can't bark orders at 50 people the way he ran a group of 12, but he also can't sit through a committee vote about fence repairs when he knows what's coming from outside those walls. It's the first time Rick has to be more than a weapon, and he's not entirely sure he remembers how, but if that transition feels uncomfortable, it's nothing compared to what happens next, because Negan is about to teach Rick exactly how little control he actually has. Every single entry on this list so far has been about Rick gaining power through violence, killing Shane, biting Joe's throat out, butchering the hunters in a church. Each time, Rick acts, and the problem dies. That's been the pattern. And Negan erases it in one night. Rick's group is forced to kneel in a semicircle on a dark roadside, completely surrounded by saviors, while a man with a barbed wire baseball bat called Lucille plays eeny meeny miny mo with their lives. Abraham is chosen first, and to his credit, he goes out like Abraham. He sits up straight, locks eyes with Negan, and tells him to suck my nuts. Then Lucille comes down. But Negan isn't finished. Daryl throws a punch out of rage, and Negan decides disobedience needs consequences. So he turns to Glenn. Glenn's skull is caved in on camera, his eye bulging from the socket, and his final words to Maggie are, "I'll find you," which is, one of the most emotionally devastating lines in television history delivered while a man's brain is literally visible. Cool. That's also a thing that happened, but here's what actually breaks Rick. It's not the deaths. It's what comes after. Negan drags Rick into an RV, drives him through fog and walkers, and systematically dismantles every shred of defiance left in him. Then he brings Rick back, puts an axe in his hand, and tells him to cut off Carl's arm. Right there, in front of everyone. Rick begs. Rick screams. Rick completely shatters. Negan stops him before he has to do it, but that's the point. The damage is already done. Rick doesn't need to swing the axe, he just needs to know that he would have. This is the first time in the entire series where Rick's willingness to be violent is completely, utterly irrelevant. He can't bite his way out, he's been outmaneuvered by an enemy with a massive, organized network, and individual heroism means nothing against it. Every tool Rick has built his survival on fails simultaneously. The Season 7 premiere lost roughly 5 million viewers, with many feeling the show crossed into gratuitous brutality. Fair enough. But from a character perspective, this is the most transformative thing that's ever happened to Rick Grimes. It doesn't just hurt him, it destroys his entire self-concept as the man who can always protect his people. He walks away from that lineup a fundamentally different person, one who flinches, one who obeys, one who has to rebuild everything from nothing. But if losing his friends nearly destroyed him, losing his son will change what he's fighting for entirely. Carl's last words. Here's the thing about Carl Grimes. He doesn't die in a blaze of glory. He doesn't go out fighting a horde or taking a bullet meant for someone else. He gets bitten helping a stranger kill walkers because that stranger believed freeing the souls trapped inside them was the right thing to do. Carl heard that and thought, yeah, I'll help you with that. Compassion. That's what kills him, which is, not ideal. The bite is on his torso, and he knows exactly what it means, but he doesn't scream. He doesn't collapse. He hides it. He spends his remaining hours writing farewell letters and carefully, deliberately telling his father to stop. Stop the killing, stop the cycle, build something instead of burning everything down. And that's what makes this so devastating for Rick. If Carl had died violently, if Negan's people had shot him, Rick could have channeled that grief into fury. He's done it before. But Carl dies doing something good. He dies because he chose mercy over suspicion, and his final words aren't "avenge me." They're "be better." That rewires Rick's entire trajectory. For the majority of the series, everything Rick does, every throat he bites, every skull he caves in, is justified by one sentence. "I'm keeping my son alive. Carl is the reason, Carl is the future." And now Carl is gone, and in his place is a set of handwritten letters asking his father to choose peace. Now, in the comics, Carl doesn't die here. He survives and grows into adulthood, becoming the living proof that Rick's world was worth fighting for. The show's decision to kill him generated massive backlash. Fans argued it gutted the narrative's long-term potential, removing the one character who could carry Rick's legacy forward. But regardless of how you feel about it, the effect on Rick is undeniable. Carl's death removes the reason Rick has been fighting since Season 1 and replaces it with a moral compass pointing in a completely different direction. No more whatever it takes. Now it's find another way. The cruel irony is almost too perfect. The boy who watched his mother die, who shot walkers before he could drive, who grew up harder and faster than any child should, dies because he stopped to help someone. And his dying wish is that his father, the man who bit a guy's throat out with his teeth, learns to show mercy. But if Carl's final words gave Rick a new direction, the bridge is where he proves whether he actually listened. Destroying the bridge. Every single event on this list, every kill, every loss, every transformation, it all funnels into one moment on a bridge that Rick Grimes built with his own hands. Here's the setup. Rick is injured, badly. He's bleeding out, barely conscious, riding a horse toward a bridge the Allied communities have been constructing together. Behind him is a walker herd so massive it will wipe out everything these people have built. Alexandria, the hilltop, the kingdom, all of it. The bridge itself is the whole point. It's not just wood and nails. It's the physical manifestation of everything Rick has been working toward since Carl died. Connection, cooperation, a future where these communities actually function together. He poured what was left of his broken soul into building this thing, and now he has to destroy it. Rick shoots the dynamite, and the whole structure goes up in a wall of fire. Walkers collapse into the river, timber splinters into nothing, and his friends, Daryl, Michonne, Carol, they're standing on the other side, watching the man they followed through hell disappear in an explosion. As far as they know, Rick Grimes just died. He didn't. Jadis pulls him from the river and loads him onto a helicopter, and Rick vanishes from their world entirely. But to the people he saved, Rick Grimes is dead, and a dead hero is a different thing than a living leader. A dead hero becomes a myth, something communities tell their children to explain why they keep going. Think about where this man started. He woke up alone in a hospital bed, confused, terrified, searching for his family in a world that had ended without him. He believed in law, in due process, in doing things the right way. Then he stabbed his best friend in the heart. He lost his wife on a blood-soaked floor while a baby screamed. He bit a man's throat out with his teeth. He hacked cannibals apart in a church. He knelt in the dirt while a man with a baseball bat crushed the skulls of people he loved. He held his dying son and listened to a teenager beg him to choose mercy over revenge. All of that leads to one decision: blow up the thing you built to save the people you built it for. The lawman who couldn't pull the trigger becomes a man who destroys his own legacy so others might have a future he'll never see. He started the series waking up alone. He ends it disappearing alone. But the world he leaves behind is permanently different because of every event in between. That's Rick Grimes, not the man with the gun. The man who, when it mattered most, chose everyone else over himself, and then vanished into a story bigger than he ever was. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.